Welcome to the Innovators, the podcast where we talk to the people building the future. In each episode, we sit down with technologists, founders, researchers, and engineers who are doing real, impactful work. They're applying technologies in ways that change how we live, work, and think. Whether it's breakthroughs in AI, climate tech, health systems, or digital infrastructure, this show is about the people turning ambitious ideas into working systems. No hype, just thoughtful conversations with the folks making it happen. Welcome to the Innovators, a show about amazing people doing awesome things. I'm John Biggs. Today on the show we have Arthur Chen. He's the CEO and co-founder of Verity Agriculture. Welcome, Arthur.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about Verity. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we're basically building physical AI for farm infrastructure, and we're starting with focusing on irrigation infrastructure, which is one of the most critical pieces of assets for farms worldwide.
Okay. So what does that entail? So infrastructure is, are we talking like pipes? Are we talking like controllers? What does it do?
Yeah. So the basic idea here is we are bringing this legacy farm infrastructure into the 21st century. When you walk onto a farm today, you'll see a lot of infrastructure out there, right? There's pipes, there's valves, pumps, and many other different types of equipment as well. And essentially, the way that this is all operated today is manual. About 95% of farms still operate their operations in a manual way. So it's workers going out to the field to check, every piece of equipment and operate it as well. And you might have expected that, technologies like automation would have solved these challenges for farms long ago. But the truth is that the majority of farms don't use automation today because it's traditionally been too expensive. These are often custom, bespoke installations that you need to do special construction on in order to get working. It's often difficult to actually operate and maintain at scale as well for everyday farm workers. And there's a lot of point solutions out there. So a smart valve is, it's helpful, but ultimately, processes like irrigation, for example, are a lot more than just controlling a valve. And so a lot of solutions out there only do one thing at a time.
So the goal is to optimize irrigation, right? So you basically have these smart valves that go on and off, and then you have some way to control where it's going on and off. So if there's part of the field that needs more water, then you can send it that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's one way it works. But the general idea is that we've built these fleets of smart devices where they can simply retrofit on top of the existing infrastructure on the farm to make what's already there smart. So rather than replacing the infrastructure that's out there, you can turn an existing analog piece of pipe into a smart pipe, essentially. And with what we've built, it's modular, so it can basically make any type of equipment on a farm smart. So, from your pipes to your filter stations, your sulfur burners and so on, all of those types of equipment that you find on a farm, we're able to retrofit to and actually make it smart. So by doing that, we're not only optimizing, processes like irrigation so that farmers can produce better yields or save water, but really importantly as well, we're also automating a lot of these repetitive manual workflows where farmers are, walking through fields all day just to check their equipment or just to operate their tools in a certain way. And that's something that, we're helping them to automate in a really easy way. Two really big things here, for us as founders. We come from, our own backgrounds, we're coming in from farming families. So this is very close to our hearts. And, it's something where we've seen, our own families, farm in ways that have been really traditional. And we're in a time where, there are economic uncertainties and climate uncertainties that mean, farmers are dealing with a lot of challenges, right? Everything from rising labor costs to problems like, extreme water scarcity and extreme weather as well that are making it very tough to farm. And so, the idea of what we're doing here is to make sure that we can make our food systems, our, food production systems resilient and able to weather these types of uncertainties that are out there.
What did it take to build something like this out? It sounds like it's like kind of commodity hardware, right? What did it take to connect everything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the interesting part, right? The hardware itself, is it's something that can, we're trying to make it commoditized. But, when you look at the, traditional automation solutions out there, a lot of what's out there is actually custom made, essentially. It's something where you have to ask a consulting firm to design a certain setup for you in order for it to work properly. And that's where, the cost of that, balloon significantly, right? And that's how they make their money. And so what we've built here is basically we've designed hardware that is designed to be commoditized, something that you can put on every farm on the planet. And that's how we see that this actually makes this impact. What's interesting here is that building the hardware itself is not enough. It's really about the software that connects all that hardware together, about how these smart devices work as a fleet to accomplish different types of tasks on a farm. So as one example, even just to do basic irrigation, you can't just turn on devices at a whim, right? They have to work in a certain sequence with each other against hydraulic integrity requirements, because, if you turn a valve on too early or too late, you could either run out of water on the farm or you could actually blow something up. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of these different system level considerations that you need. And that's a lot of the software and firmware that we've developed here to help with that.
Interesting. In terms of getting investment for this, hardware is hard to get investment for. How did you guys raise?
Yeah, I think the important thing at the end of the day is that, you're building for an industry that is, it's a traditional industry, and it's also a very fundamental industry as well. And that's really where building for agriculture, there is a hardware component, but there is also a software and a services component as well. At the end of the day, what we're providing to farms is an alternative form of labor, one that is digital instead of, being human, essentially. And that allows them to do things that are very valuable. And because we've been able to demonstrate significant, adoption within this sector that traditionally is tough, and with building hardware as well, we've been able to build out the proof points that have been able to secure a significant amount of investment here. And with investors as well, it's always important to really work with strategically aligned investors as well. So we work with a number of hard tech investors who invest in resilience and rural dynamism, as well as companies that invest in agriculture technology, of course, and climate tech.
In terms of growth and change in this industry, how far along is it? Is it just you guys and a couple others who are turning it into some roboticized farm systems, or is it? I can only imagine like John Deere and all those folks are super computerized as well, right?
Yeah, so they are super computerized, different kinds of equipment though. So John Deere, of course, specializes in mobile machinery and tractors. Where we're working in infrastructure, this is an area that's pretty much not digitized at all. You, of course, have some of these, consulting firms that are incumbents that have been able to, build some automation out there. But again, there's only about 5% adoption. And, really it's the 95% of the market that still hasn't really been able to adopt automation in a meaningful way. So there's ourselves. There's a couple other companies here really, building into this emerging segment of the market, which ultimately is the largest part as well. And, we see infrastructure as, one of the sort of overlooked, asset classes within agriculture, and irrigation within that is one of the biggest classes of equipment, even just within that infrastructure piece.
So I have this sense that the average farmer is probably not in front of a spreadsheet all day. Has that changed over the past decades, or is that still true? Are they still out there, milking the cows and all that other good stuff? And how would they use your tool if their attention is focused on the cows, right? Something like that, mm-hmm. or the crops.
Yeah, exactly. And you're exactly right. Spreadsheets, of course, more common in agriculture now, but when you're really working on the operations side, traditionally you're not going to, you're not spending a lot of time in front of a spreadsheet. You're out there in the field. You're solving very immediate problems, that exist on a farm, making sure your crop has what it needs, making sure that your equipment and your infrastructure is all working properly as well. So it's a job that requires a lot of firefighting, running from one problem to the next to solve things. Really where we come in, right? It's two things. Number one is making sure that you can help offload some of that chaos to something that's automated that can handle some of that chaos for you, so that you have better focus on the things that, ultimately, matter more, right? So rather than having you run out to, check on your valves or your pipes, for example, being able to hand that off to Verity that can do that for you. That's a really big gain, and that, gains the trust of the everyday operators. And I think at the end of the day, it's that, a lot of these tools in the past have been built for very technical staff members, people who, maybe come from an agriculture engineering background, for example. But the truth is the majority of, the farming workforce, they're the everyday operators who are in the fields. They're very good at farming and they're very smart, but they might not have that, technology background to be using and really fiddling around with a lot of automation knobs. So we've built for, that user, that everyday farm operator, rather than, that technical farm manager. And that's also where we're seeing a lot of inroads within the industry.
How do you sell into farmers? How do you sell farmers on your project, or how do you sell farmers on your product?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting because when you look at ag tech and the fusion of ag tech, there's usually very traditional ways of getting to market. So it's a relationship-based business. There's a lot of door-to-door selling. There's a lot of trade shows that you attend, traditionally. But what we found coming into this is that that's hard to scale, right? It's hard to scale trade shows. It's hard to scale door-to-door sales. And so we've developed a number of different ways to generate leads in a very reliable way, but also in a way that maintains those relationships. So we have a very robust outbound program here where we're able to go into specific decision makers at these farms and go through certain registries and databases in order to find the growers where we're able to, create the most impact for them and actually be of most value. On top of that, we have our own data sources that we can use to help enrich that. We can bring in satellite data, for example, to, better understand what kinds of needs that farms have in certain regions. And the last part I'll mention here is that we have found that, farms, especially in certain regions like California, they've gotten a lot of, outbound to them and, they've seen technology, but at the end of the day, they want to feel like they have agency in making those decisions as to, what tools to adopt. And that's really where we found building good marketing, showing how we are actually helping with the farming community, has actually, driven a lot of inbound demand to us in both our core regions and in new ones as well. So there's a lot of this pull motion that we see from the market because of what we've been able to demonstrate there.
What does the world look like when you guys are successful?
Yeah, what we're building towards here is we're basically building for, smart infrastructure. We believe that you walk 10 years into the future and every new and existing piece of infrastructure you see on a farm is going to be smart in some way. That includes irrigation. That includes, the different buildings and processing plants that you see on farms. It also includes, things like the power systems and, the regular plumbing that these, farms are using, right? These are, complex and distributed operations that are out there. So that's what we're building for here. And, ultimately we look at, models of companies like John Deere, for example, one of the world's largest companies, period. And, they actually have revenue, greater than Airbnb and Netflix combined, right? So they're actually very big. And that's the kind of company that, we're building here. And, we're doing that in the infrastructure side of agriculture.
Is there another problem that you guys could solve? Is there something that you've been itching to fix out in the world?
There are a lot of things that we're thinking about and that we'd love to fix. And I'll say, one of the ones that we think about a lot is, the financing aspect of agriculture. When you look at other industries like, energy, clean energy, for example, there are a lot of different financing instruments out there that are helping operators to put projects into place, structured financing, project finance, and so on. And that's, worked really well, right? You see new solar plants come up. You see nuclear power plants come up and being financed with some of these instruments. In agriculture, it's quite different. You actually don't see a lot of those types of financing instruments. In fact, I know of one company that's done it successfully, and they actually borrowed the contracts from the solar industry and repurposed them for agriculture. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to build financing instruments and fintech for agriculture to really support, the financing needs of, making agriculture, much more resilient and also efficient.
Very cool. Where are you guys at? What's for the future of Verity?
Yeah, so right now, we've been primarily focused on our core regions on just the west coast of North America, so US and Canada, and we're now starting to, go into our continental expansion. So we're expanding out east into all of North America, into Mexico as well, and into LATAM later this year. We've seen terrific growth in the past year. We've grown our sales about 16x, and really, from here on out, we're looking at how we can, sustain that growth and keep bringing value to, these other regions where we've seen a lot of pull from.
And are you guys still raising?
We aren't currently raising, but we will be raising our Series A in early 2027.
That's wild. And how long have you been at the project? are the
Yeah,
project?
so we've been working on this for a few years now. So I started this basically while I was still in college, and we worked on it, part time for a bit. But at this point, it's been about 4.5 years full time building this. We spent the first 3.5 years or so purely on R&D. So a lot of iteration, a lot of being out, in the heat, with farmers to really understand what works for them. And in the past year, we started commercializing it and have seen a lot of great success that way. So yeah, it's been a ride and a journey for sure.
Was there ever a moment where you said, no more Verity, I'm done?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think, truthfully, no, actually. There's been times where it's felt very difficult for sure. But I think on account of just the when you see the impact you're able to create in the field, you realize how important of a thing you're doing it is. And at the end of the day, it's a mission. It's not a ploy to make money. It's a mission to actually change the world. And financial outcomes can come once you actually build something big and build something impactful.
Very cool. Arthur, thank you for this. It's been really fascinating.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right. The website, what's the website again? So for folks to check it out?
Yeah, it's Verity.
All right. This has been The Innovators. I'm John Biggs. We'll see you next time.